Good evening and welcome back to Ernie's Tennis channel. I haven't done a video in a while. I've just been on court a lot and I've been super swamped. But before the holidays arrive, I did want to drop off this updated list of the best young men's tennis players of the next generation. As you'll recall, my first video that I ever uploaded was a top 8 list of who I thought the elite players were that were under 30 that were not part of the big three. Now that I've had a tennis season to kind of see who else is out there on the scene and reflect on my picks, I wanted to do an updated list. For 8, I have Alexander Zverev. Zverev did not make my list last year, and for obvious reasons. He had a lot of issues in big matches with his serve. His mental toughness is something that was questioned a lot, but he really did take a step up this year by making the US Open final. Is there an asterisk on that? Maybe, but still, he played excellent tennis. He's a lot more aggressive than he used to be, even though he's got a lot of stamina as a bigger player and he does do pretty well in longer matches. I think his game needs to be more of the aggressive backhands, hitting hard, and using his physical tools to end points quickly. And I saw a lot more of that this year, and I think he's kind of back on track as being one of the top stars of a generation after, 3 or 4 years ago, people thought he was the dude. At number 7, I have Denis Shapovalov. Now, what I really like about Shapovalov and his progression is that he's playing much more mature tennis points. And that's obvious to anyone that watched the US Open or even really any of the tournaments that he played at the end of the year, even the matches that he lost. Now, last year on my rankings, I said I left him off the list because I just thought that he was the classic example of the guy you played in JV tennis that tried to hit winners on every shot. Now he's setting up points. He's not trying to hit a winner on every shot. He's really using the court to his advantage. I love his hyper athletic style, and obviously his ceiling might be, the highest on this list perhaps. And so if he continues to do what he did this year in terms of just being a smarter tennis player, being more mature, the sky's the limit for him. I thought that, Shapovalov may have been that flash in the pan guy, or maybe like a Gael Monfils, who is always entertaining but not really a real threat in the second week of tournament. Definitely disagree with that. I think Shapovalov's turned a corner, and I would not be surprised to see him make a sneaky run to like a slam semifinal on a hard court. 6 on my list, I have Casper Ruud. Now, Ruud is a player that I have to confess I really didn't know much about heading into the year, but he just became such a staple of a lot of these tournaments that I had no choice but to watch his matches. He's apparently already basically the best tennis player that's ever come out of Norway, and I really think his game is suited well for longer matches. The thing about Casper Ruud is that he's a gamer. Every single match he's going to be playing his best tennis. He's never overwhelmed by opponents that are, top 10 players, and he can hit winners from pretty much all over the court. The forehand's legit, the backhand's legit, the net game is awesome. He's got a great serve. I like his body type. He's like a stockier Wawrinka type of build, so he's able to sustain power from bigger players and also overpower smaller players. So Casper Ruud, really intriguing. He shot up the rankings as much as anybody this year, and I don't think he's just that guy that had a hot year. I think he's got the talent to really stay around for a while. At number 5, I have Hugo Humbert from France, and to be honest, this guy might be the most intriguing player that I've seen in a while. In terms of just his overall, array of shot making, this guy can beat you with angles. He can beat you with, off-pace shots. He can beat you with, 95-mile-per-hour forehand winners. As a lefty, he's just always going to be a little bit of a challenge for right-handed players. And, at 22 years old, he plays like that 50-year-old at the park that just knows all these weird slices and just tricks to win matches in different ways. So keep your eye out on Humbert. Just to list a couple of things, he made the 4th round of Wimbledon last year, and I completely missed it. This year, he beat Deminar, he beat Tsitsipas, he beat Medvedev. So he beat all of the other talented young players that he's going up against. So Hugo Humbert, mark my words, a lock. And I say this again, a lock to make at least one quarterfinal at a Grand Slam next year, maybe even a semifinal. I think he's really knocking on the door, and it took him a couple of years to put his game together after being a promising youngster, but he's arrived. He's legit, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the top 10 of the men's tour by the end of the year next year. Next on the list, I have Andrei Rublev. Rublev coming in at number 4, just where I had him last year. Now, you might be asking yourself, if I'm so high on Rublev, why do I only have him at number 4? I mean, especially with the year he put together. Quarterfinal of the French Open, the 4th round of the Aussie Open, the US Open quarters as well. I mean, this guy, I was absolutely dominant this year. The reason I have him at number 4 and not higher is because I do think that his game lacks the variation of the players ranked above him. His forehand is probably the biggest weapon on tour right now, if I'm going to be honest. His mentality is 10 out of 10. I said this last year, he's David Ferrer if David Ferrer had more offense and power. The guy is just awesome to watch, one of my favorite players. I know that he's going to be consistent. I just don't know if he has that extra level of just like natural talent that's going to carry him over some of the other players I have on the list. But the guy's going to work himself into position. I think if you look at him and someone like Dominic Thiem, they're kind of the same career progression where every single year they're just getting better by 5 or 10%. And you're really starting to see that pay off. I have Dominic Thiem at number 3. Obviously won the US Open, so he's now a Grand Slam champion. I said it last year and I'll say it again. Of all the people on the list, he's the best player right now in terms of his consistency. He's never going to lose to someone that he's better than. He's always going to be in the second round of tournaments. But being older than the rest of the players on the list, I really firmly believe we're looking at the best that Dominic Thiem is going to have to offer. He's at his ceiling right now, and at his ceiling, he's pretty much, the 4th or 5th best player in the world. I never really see him walk into a match against Nadal or Djokovic or even Medvedev and think he's going to win. He doesn't give me that feeling the way that some of the other players do. No offense to him. He's a great player. He's got amazing intensity. His conditioning is 10 out of 10. I love his ground strokes, but I think that he's a little bit too much brute force and he needs to become a little bit more artistic, which he has been at times, but I feel like sometimes he falls back into the trap of just hitting everything as hard as possible, and he's not quite as overpowering as Nadal or even Rublev on the forehand side for me to think he can get away with that long term, especially as some of these other players start getting smarter and just growing into their bodies more. So number 2 on the list, I have Daniil Medvedev from Russia, fresh off just a scorching hot finish to the year, taking down Nadal, Thiem, and Djokovic back to back to back to win the ATP finals. When you watch those matches in the ATP finals against Thiem, Djokovic, Nadal, did you ever think that he wasn't the better player? So Medvedev is really rising and becoming who I always knew he could be. I think he's the only player on tour where if he loses the first set, I'm not really threatened at all that he's going to go down in the match. He's a lot like Floyd Mayweather, just, picking his spots, trying to figure out what you're trying to do, in absolutely no rush to get off the court. More than having a weapon of his own, he really knows how to prevent the other player from asserting what they want to do. His backhand is my favorite on the tour. Maybe he doesn't hit it the hardest, but he can do the most different things with it. He can find angles on the court that really only Djokovic could find on the backhand side. It's very rare you see a guy that's as tall as him that has the movement and the defensive capabilities. And really, Medvedev is still just scratching the surface of potential. You need to use the academic side of the game to really push past players that might have more physical abilities than you. And because of that, I think his game is going to age the best. I don't think that if he suffers injuries or loses his athleticism, that he's really going to have much of a drop off in his game. Not selling any stock on Medvedev. That just brings me to the number 1 player on the list, and that's Jannik Sinner. He's almost flawless in a way to where a natural tennis watcher or a casual tennis fan would see him and be like, I don't even really understand what he's doing. That's so special. He's just technically sound. His balance is impeccable. I guess he used to be a skier. That makes sense. And he's got so much room to grow into his body. And already I saw him multiple times this year just demolish players who should have been much better than him and are much older than him and have more experience under their belt. First 19-year-old that I've seen since Nadal where I go, oh yeah, that guy's better than him. To pretty much everyone he plays. I mean, I run down the list: Zverev, Shapovalov, Ruud, Humbert, Rublev, Thiem, Medvedev. If Sinner is not injured and he's completely healthy, I almost expect him to beat all of those guys because he's so naturally talented. The injuries and the conditioning are an issue, but I think that's more to do with the fact that he's only 19 and he's not used to making the second week of tournaments playing at this high level of tennis. But Sinner has everything that you could ask for, and he's got the most devastating power on both sides that I've seen. He just hits the crap out of the ball. And he doesn't do it in a careless way the way Shapovalov does. Like, his ground strokes are super clean. He's just like very fundamentally sound, kind of like a Tim Duncan almost, but in a much flashier way, obviously. He reminds me a lot of if Andy Murray was taller and had more offense, what would his game look like? And it's something like Jannik Sinner. He's maybe the only player on this list who I could see winning double-digit Grand Slams and really being the next true, is this guy the GOAT type player. As you'll notice, this year, no Tsitsipas on the list. And you might be asking yourself, like, why? How is that guy not possibly one of the top 8 best young players? And I love Tsitsipas. He's super entertaining. He's one of my favorite players to watch. But the thing about Tsitsipas that concerns me, he's got amazing ground strokes, but absolutely no strategic awareness whatsoever. So as smart as Medvedev is, Tsitsipas is clueless at times. I feel like Tsitsipas is such a natural striker of the ball that he falls into this trap where he'll get whoever his opponent is super hot because they have to raise their level. And because Tsitsipas doesn't really know how to go 1, 2, 3 with combos and end matches like maybe a young Federer did, he gets stuck in these long rallies that wear him down. And by the second week of tournaments, he doesn't have any gas left.